What is Zionism? How did it emerge?
Theodor Herzl organized a Zionist Congress with Jews in Basel, Switzerland. And here first they decided the name of the state would be Israel, the state of the Israelites, and the flag of the state was also drawn there, the Star of Dawood in between two stripes. The star of Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. After Yusha alayhi salam conquered Jerusalem, it was Prophet Dawood alayhi salam who established a country there. This is just a reference to that. That Star of the Dawood means we will re-establish a Jewish state here. Those two stripes refer to the Nile and Euphrates rivers. The source of the mischief making is this. Because they see themselves as a superior race, above everyone else, they look down on the whole world and they hate everybody. Muslims are not the only target here. They hate Christians too. They hate the whole world and they think their property has been usurped. Think about it. Your religion teaches you something like this. All of this was yours. This and this came and seized your property. How dare they seize my property? I need to get them back. I need to take the whole world back. This is their core belief.
When and how did the Jews decide to go to Palestine?
Of course, Theodor Herzl didn't set his eyes on Jerusalem in the beginning. They first discussed whether to settle in Argentina, because the Rothschild family has vast lands in Argentina. They could have founded a state on those lands, but they didn't accept this idea. Since Jerusalem was their ancient city, they said, what are we going to do in Argentina? So they said, we need to go to Jerusalem, and this state should be established there. So they've reached this decision because for almost all of their history, they were in Jerusalem. They believe that those lands are promised by Allah to them. Therefore, they wanted to go to those lands. That's why Theodor Herzl, after the decision though, of course, who held those lands at that time? The Ottoman Empire, and at that time, Sultan Abdulhamid II was in the reign. Theodor Herzl had great power with the richest Jews backing him. He visited the Ottoman Empire a couple of times. In fact, 5, according to the visitation records of the palace, met with Sultan Abdulhamid and made a really profitable offer to the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans just came out of the war with the Russians, and at that time, the empire was trying to recover itself and pay its debts. Theodor Herzl made an offer to Sultan Abdulhamid and said, we will cover all the debt of the empire. You will have no debt to anybody. Think about how much wealth they had. They were wealthy to such a degree that they could pay all the foreign debt of the Ottoman Empire. Imagine how much they have. And he said, give us land from Jerusalem so that we can establish a state. This is how he asked in the beginning. Sultan Abdulhamid was already aware of this danger. The Jews establishing a state there, when he discussed this matter with his pashas, if they established a state, there would be bloodbath. So he already knew what could happen and was aware of the situation. He knew the history of the Jews, he knew the Holy Quran, and they would cause corruption. Abdulhamid said no to this offer. Never ever. Those lands were conquered with blood, he said diplomatically. Without revealing his real intention, he said that those lands were captured by blood and can only be given by blood. Also, he said, those lands don't belong to me, they belong to my people. I can't give you those lands. Again, he said all this in a diplomatic way. After this, he immediately issued an edict prohibiting anybody from selling land to the Jews around Al-Quds in Palestine. In other words, anticipating that they would try to do something by taking land from there piece by piece. Over this name, over that name, he prohibited it. In an article, Theodor Herzl said, in order to establish a Jewish state, we have to wait for the fall of the Ottoman Empire. This is a very interesting saying. What do we understand from this? The Jews were strong and decided to establish a state and made up their mind about toppling the Ottomans. As long as the Ottoman Empire doesn't withdraw from there, we can't do anything. Then these Jews did everything in their power to make the Ottoman Empire fall. The very first thing they did was to approach the British, because the superpower of that period, both at land and sea and politically, was in the hands of the British. Thus, in exchange for financial support, the Jews reached an agreement with the British and they received the guarantee that after the Ottomans, Palestine and Al-Quds would be given to them. Consequently, Sultan Abdulhamid was overthrown. We joined World War I, and on the Palestinian front of World War I, as you know, we had a defeat against the British. From that moment on, when the British captured Palestine, they respected their agreement with the Jews. Interestingly, the United Kingdom hadn't done anything like this for any other country, but they did it for the Jews. They called for any Jews from Europe who wanted to go to Palestine. Then, the Balfour Declaration was announced. It is that famous minister's declaration. In this declaration, it is said, "A land without a people for a people without a land," aiming to dissipate the dislike towards the Jews. They also had all the media power. They provoked everyone against Sultan Abdulhamid and they toppled him. They tried to create sympathy towards the Jews in Europe. They came up with ideas that these people were oppressed and that they also had the right to establish a state. They gradually began to settle Jews in Palestine. From this point on, the Jews began to settle in Palestine and the British soldiers were patrolling the land. Why? They protected the Jews just in case any Muslim or other group wanted to harm them. So, the British soldiers protected the life, honor, and property of the Jews there, to not let any harm come to the Jews. In a sense, so the Jews could continue to emigrate there. But not many Jews chose to go there. Yes, they thought, we can establish a state, yes, we can reach our goal. Many Jews didn't believe this. After almost 2,000 years of captivity and humiliation, we can't re-establish a state or gain strength. This felt like a dream to them. I mean, I'm talking about the people, not the people in power. Many ordinary people didn't want to bother themselves. Think about it. You have your business and you are settled. You have a certain life and accommodation in Europe. You will give up all of these and go to Palestine. You will start a new life there from scratch. The Jews didn't want this, therefore there was not much immigration to Palestine. So what British and Zionism, and by Zionism I mean Theodor Herzl and the Inner Circle, wanted, it didn't happen. Jews didn't go there. In a way they thought, they are betraying our cause. They felt a kind of resentment. We call them to the land that is promised to us, and they won't come. Nobody wanted to discomfort themselves. After a while, this cause has been forgotten. Many centuries have passed. There was this anger in the Zionist leadership against the Jews, who had forgotten their cause. While things were like this, something happened. The Nazi Party was founded in Germany, and the First World War was over. So, the goal of Zionism then was to attract all Jews to Palestine and create a crowd, a population there, and establish a state. The British also provided all kinds of political support. The Zionists supported the British financially, and they gave political and military support to Zionists, because the Jews had no military power. So, the Jews had tremendous support in those lands. I mean, if they went, the state would be established, but they didn't. However, a Nazi party was established in Germany, and its leader, Adolf Hitler, was a fierce enemy of the Jews, and he vowed to eradicate all Jews from the face of the world. He captured all of Europe in a short time and ordered concentration camps to be built. He was the worst enemy of Jews and gathered them and let all sorts of torture happen, including burning them alive. This actually worked in favor of Zionism. Why? Because all those Jews who feared Hitler's tyranny thought they couldn't survive in Europe. And as you know, Hitler attacked Russia as well, so those Jews from Russia thought the same. While Jews from different parts of the world were looking for some place to escape from this fear of Hitler, a statement was issued throughout Europe. What was in this statement? If for every Jew who moved to Palestine, they will be given land and millions in money. As long as they moved to Palestine, this information was distributed on leaflets. Of course, the fear of Hitler was the actual reason that drove them out. Because we are being slaughtered here, we need to escape. Where will we go? To Palestine. That way, people started to emigrate to Palestine from Europe in large numbers by ship. After the emigrations, there was a large Jewish population in Palestine. Surely, Hitler was done for, and after this time, the population goal was reached to obtain the lands. Since those lands were under British governance, there was an issue of seizing those lands. Because those lands actually belonged to Palestinians. There were already people living there. I mean, those lands were not empty. In the Ottoman period, Palestinians, our Muslim brothers and sisters, were living in that region.
So when did Muslims who lived there realize the real purpose of the Jews, and what happened after this realization?
For instance, did the Six-Day War happen during this period? Now it is like this. Since the Jews went there, they didn't live peacefully. A Jewish organization named Haganah was founded by the British. They thought, we are going to establish a Jewish state here, but we need armed forces. To be a state, we need an army. The Haganah organization is the basis of the Israeli army. They also committed outrages there. Zionism restored the forgotten language, Hebrew. They tried very hard to establish their connection to that old alphabet and create a sense of nation. And how many years it goes on? Let's say it's 1918. It goes on for 30 years. So during those 30 years, there were many developments, and that was when the Muslims started to realize. It was when the Jewish people started to arm themselves, because they realized that their goals were different. They realized the Jews came there permanently, they came for occupation. From that moment on, the Palestinians woke up and the selling of land stopped. No more compromise in any way was made, and against those armed Jews in the Haganah organization, Palestinians started to take up arms. There were armed conflicts. The conflicts resumed until 1948, and the British had a military presence and protected the Jews completely. The Jews were fighting with the confidence that the British soldiers were at their back. In fact, it is exactly the same thing today. They attack Gaza, and the American Navy immediately comes to support them. It was the same then. They attacked with the British soldiers at their back. If the British soldiers were withdrawn, we'd see if they could survive there. I need to add that mainly the British forces suppressed these clashes and in an unfair way. This is my boy. This is the naughty boy. They break up the fight. They're angry on the surface, but behind the scenes, they're saying, well done. By 1948, the Jews there had established all the organizations and announced to the whole world that they had established a state called Israel. The state they established encompasses Palestine completely. As soon as they declared the state of Israel, all Muslim Arab states around Israel declared war. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt. It was actually obvious that these countries would declare war on Israel. By the way, Israel was willing to fight them. We are still in 1948. They couldn't have established their governmental organization in such a short time. I mean, it is not possible to have it in an instant. It means that they had planned this a long time ago. We are talking about the period of Sultan Abdul Hamid. They had planned this back then. Their organizational structures were planned beforehand, who would hold office and where, because in such a short time, they became a full-fledged state. All of a sudden, there were educational institutions. It's almost like a ready-made pack. Again, these plans were made a long time ago, but they had the most powerful armies at their back. They received all kinds of support. Their intelligence activities were very strong. Those states collapsed within, and there were a lot of tricks and maneuvers and intelligence activities. And there had always been wars at such intervals. There was a huge war in 1967 and another one in 1973. The Arab countries of that region had been at war with Israel constantly, and it has always been the Arabs who have suffered from the war, because they have exhausted all of their powers. I mean, their organizational structures crumbled during these wars, as if Israel was deliberately pulling them on itself. As if they were saying, come on, come to me, I'll destroy your power. You want a piece of me? I'll destroy your power too. I mean, Egypt was a great power then, and they finished Egypt. They collapsed all the military power of Egypt. Iraq's fate was the same. This is where we are always wrong. The land between the Nile and the Euphrates is in danger. We think that there is no danger for other places. Some parts of Turkey are within those lands, within the border of the Euphrates. But we are wrong. As I said before, they want the whole world.
Will this turmoil in the Middle East continue? How will it end?
There is an anecdote mentioned in Masnawi. There was a scholar, a sort of a godly person in a country. This person was a person of charity who donated a lot. He used to borrow a lot of money from tradesmen. He spent all of the borrowed money on good deeds. He trusted Allah. Allah has granted him with wealth and sustenance, and he paid all his debts with them. He has never encountered any problems. One day he got sick and fell on his deathbed. It was a serious illness. People came to visit the godly person in his home. But most of those who came to visit were the ones he owed money. I mean, they actually wanted to ask for their debt, in a sense. They were talking among themselves about how they couldn't ask for their money back from someone on his deathbed. The godly person heard them. They were talking. He owed me this much. He owed me that much. Now, who will cover for this? How will it be? The godly person was grieved by the situation. He said, a scholar is passing away. You know how they say, the death of a scholar is the death of the world. It is something significant. He thought, instead of feeling sorry for losing a godly person, for the passing away of a friend of Allah, they are after their money. At that moment, a child passed by outside. He was a dessert maker and was selling hulwa. When the child passed by, he said to his disciple, call for the child. They called the child. He said, give everyone from your dessert. Then the child handed out to everyone some dessert. Everyone ate it. Of course, all the dessert is finished. The boy was happy because he finished all the dessert. He didn't have to walk around trying to sell it. He thought he can go to his master with a full day's sale. He wanted the money from the godly person for the dessert. He said, there is no money. The child was surprised. What does it mean there is no money? Where is the money? I just handed out the dessert. Everyone ate it. The godly person said, there is no money, just go. When he said that, the child started to cry. On this time, the tradesman started to grumble. He has no money. On the way out, he took the money of the child as well. He did the same thing to us. After the boy started to cry, the men became enraged. Seeing them enraged, the boy slammed his tray to the ground and started, what am I going to say to my master? I've spent all my whole war. He'll ask me, what have you done to them? He will say to me this and that. The boy's wailing took the place down. Just then someone knocked on the door. They opened the door. Who is it? The godly person asked. Who is it? A man entered saying, a Muslim sent you his zakat. How much money does this godly person owe to all those people, including the dessert? 4,000 liras. He asked, how much money is there in the zakat? Is it 4,000? For instance, with today's currency, there are 4,000 liras. He said, give everyone their due. Pay for the child's money as well. He said to everyone, now leave. They said, what did we do? We disrespected the great godly person. When everyone felt embarrassed, the godly person said to them, so what is the wisdom of this? This money would come to me eventually. It was predestined. This blessing would be granted to us by Allah, but its time had been postponed. There was some more time. When you started to talk about my debts, when you started to talk against me, just so you shouldn't gossip or backbite, this child came to my rescue. I bought this boy sweets. When I didn't pay, he started to cry. The cries of this child hastened the deliverance of this money. And it arrived just on time. I've given your money. Now, leave, and I'll take my leave of you. Just as this kid's cries brought the blessing of Allah forward, the acts of persecution result in bringing Allah's wrath forward in the same way. So these cries of the kids in Gaza today, the cries of the children, the cries of the martyred people will cause the wrath of Allah to come swiftly. The more they oppress people, their calamity will find them more quickly. And inshallah, soon we will all see that the state of Israel can no longer survive with the oppression they cause. As Allah said in the Holy Quran, He said that there was the first corruption, and there was the second corruption, and there is a third one. If you return to sin, we will return to punishment. There is Zionist corruption all over the world that the Israelites cause, and innocent civilians of Gaza pay the ultimate price. And I hope and firmly believe that very soon a great calamity will fall upon the state of Israel, and the state of Israel will collapse. May our Lord bestow us to see those days.